AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Monday, January 18th, 2021. It is Dr. King Day, and we hope everybody is doing well today. And we know the inauguration is coming up also, so a lot of people are happy about that. I know I am. So hopefully you had a good Dr. King Day. Hopefully you learned a lot about Dr. King as well. Because oftentimes, like I said before, like I've been saying the past couple of days, I don't get asked to speak at a lot of Dr. King Day celebrations, and I don't do Dr. King Day presentations that are designed to make white people feel comfortable with the oppression of African Americans, because a lot of times that's what a lot of the celebrations boil down to. A lot of people have good intentions when they when they organize the events, but somehow between the planning meetings and corporate donations and things like that, something gets lost. So on our Sunday night show, we dealt with some history of Dr. King and dispelled myths. We've been re-airing that show on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. So go back and watch that if you missed it. And we had a lot of information there. And we talked about Dr. King and economic empowerment. I shared an excerpt of a interview that Dr. King did with NBC News back in May 8th. 1967. Actually, I've shared excerpts of that interview for the past 3 years. It was digitally remastered and came out. It was re-released in 2018. So I've been sharing it since it came out. And this ties into a lot of little known information about Dr. King. This is why I tell people you have to read books Dr. King wrote. You can't just go by excerpts of speeches that you hear Dr. King, especially on Dr. King Day, on the television. Okay, on the television, it's a vision that tells lies oftentimes. So I did a lecture back in 2015, did it again in 2018, and I think maybe 2019. The distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the revolutionary, will not be televised on the television. The revolutionary will not be televised on the television. So we have that full presentation available at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It's on DVD and digital download. It's a 2-hour presentation. So I do a lot of history about Dr. King and dispel a lot of myths. All right. And I encourage people to read books Dr. King wrote, like his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Because if you actually read Dr. King's books, you'll get an entirely different impression of Dr. King than you will from watching people talk. Well, people in mainstream media talk about Dr. King, or just excerpts of speeches that they play in mainstream media. Okay, and sometimes they mean well, but they don't know either. And then a crucial book to read is called Martin Malcolm in America, A Dream or a Nightmare by James H. Cone. Martin Malcolm in America, A Dream or a Nightmare by James H. Cone. James H. Cone is known as the father of Black liberation theology. And I read this book back in 1994. And this book shows how toward the end of both of their lives, the ideologies of Dr. King and Malcolm X are converging. And Malcolm is sounding like Dr. King, and Dr. King is sounding like Malcolm. Okay, it's a deep, deep history there. All right, so we're going to talk some more dealing with Dr. King and economic empowerment. I'm going to share another excerpt of this interview from 1967 that's called After Civil Rights, Black Power. After Civil Rights, Black Power. And it's important to understand that the Black Power movement basically is going to come out of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinated Committee. SNCC is founded Well, SCLC is founded in 1957 by Dr. King, Ella Baker, and others. And SNCC is going to be founded in about April, May 1960. And SNCC comes out of SCLC, but it's a standalone organization for college students, high school students, things like this. And Ella Baker helps to found SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. John Lewis is going to be a chairman of SNCC. In 1966, Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture is going to defeat John Lewis and win the chairmanship of SNCC. And SNCC takes a different direction and embraces Black power, even though those elements were in SNCC before Kwame Ture became chairman. It's really going to go in that direction. Okay, so we'll share some more excerpts of that speech, and then that interview, and then that ties into a discussion we had on Sunday's show, talking about the Kerner Commission Report. Kerner Commission Report that was released in March of 1968, 1 month before Dr. King was assassinated, and it was commissioned July 28th, 1967, by President Lyndon Johnson. This was the day after the Detroit Rebellion ended, July 27th, 1967. And the Kerner Commission was designed to study the rebellions that were taking place across the country, African Americans rebelling against white supremacy, what a lot of white people will call riots, and some African Americans. But it was designed to look at the rebellions from 1964 to 1967 and to determine what was causing these rebellions. Why were African Americans rebelling? Okay, they wanted to look at three things: what happened, why did it happen, and what could be done to prevent racial disturbance in the future. And the results of the Kerner Commission report were damning. They were on point, and they addressed the negative impact that racism and white supremacy were having on the African American community. The solutions that they recommended, I think, were correct, but the commitment was not there to implement the solutions. And Dr. King, and what Dr. King says in this interview from 67, talks about the lack of commitment on the part of white America to address the economic issues dealing with African Americans that are the result of racism, white supremacy, a legacy of slavery. He said that senators and people in Congress, they would vote for, white people will vote for the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65. But then when it comes time to address the structural issues that are negatively impacting African Americans, that commitment was not there. So we'll talk some about that. And then on yesterday's show, we talked a little bit about Reverend Raphael Warnock, who won the Georgia Senate race, and he won that runoff race in Georgia. He beat Senator Kelly Loeffler. We talked about the runoff rule, the runoff law for statewide races in Georgia, and why it was put in place in 1963. It was championed by a segregationist state representative named Denmark Groover in Georgia, and it was put in place deliberately to lock African Americans out of statewide power, statewide elected positions: senator, governor, secretary of state, attorney general, etc. So what Reverend Raphael Warnock did was not supposed to happen, because there were laws in place to keep that from happening. He defied. His victory was a direct frontal attack and defeat of white supremacy. So, as we talked about yesterday, he has been receiving death threats, and News1.com has an article: Proud Boys member denied bail after threatening to kill Raphael Warnock. And this is new developments from the FBI confirms members of the white supremacist mob who attacked Capitol Hill last week intended to capture and assassinate members of Congress. But this is dealing with a direct threat on Reverend Raphael Warnock. also. This is from news1.com, January 15th, 2021. So then the question has to be asked, well, Georgia is a former Confederate state, and you have a concerted effort in states like Georgia to lock African Americans out of political power, even though after Reconstruction, you had about 22 African American men that were members of Congress and 2 in the Senate. You have a governor, PBS Pinchback, things like this, right? So how does this effort to lock African Americans out of political power, how does this tie into the history of slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and this whole legacy? Well, we have to look at the concerted effort that took place to rewrite Civil War history, and it's called the Lost Cause. The concerted effort to rewrite Civil War history, okay, and it's called the Lost Cause, and it was largely championed and organized by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Okay, the United Daughters of the Confederacy altered the South's memory of the Civil War. And this is why when you hear me speak and you see my presentations and things like this, I talk about the fact that Americans are very ignorant of history, and America needs a massive history lesson. America needs a massive history lesson. This is why I talk about the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Teaching Hard History American Slavery, Teaching Hard History American Slavery. It's about a 52-page study. You can download this from splcenter.org. I took it to the printer, got it printed up. And this documents how the history of slavery is largely incorrectly being taught in schools all across the country. How the history of slavery is largely incorrectly being taught in schools all across the country. All right. And it then gives numerous suggestions on how to more correctly teach that history. Because if they are not learning that proper history in school, they're going to grow up largely to be adults that don't understand this history. These are going to be people who become attorneys, judges, people who vote, and the policies that are put in place are put in place based upon people's partly their understanding of history. Okay. And politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So you have to understand the history of policies put in place and history of conditions that exist to also understand how to solve those problems, solve those conditions. Okay. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, now on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon what you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, to sign up for our email newsletter. Somebody asked for the title. I think you're talking about the title of the study. It's called Teaching Hard History. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. It's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the advisory board that put this together, the chair of the advisory board, is none other than Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries. Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries. And Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries is a nephew of one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. That's Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries. I've interviewed him here on the African History Network show before. We're going to get him back on again soon. There's a lot of people I want to interview. I'm just so busy. So I had to set those up. All right, we're coming up on a break. Listen to the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Are you getting ready for fall or winter? We have the solution for all seasonal clothing needs. Kemeticwear.com is the go-to online source for Kemetic African fashion and lifestyle products with a contemporary twist. We're committed to offer unique styles reflecting African heritage. Kemeticwear.com is inspired by KemeticScribes.com to influence our people in learning and showing pride. Please visit our website at Kemeticwear.com.
25 years, the Black History 1 Mobile Museum has on the rich legacy of the museum movement in America by showcasing original artifacts of Black experience at colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, and cultural events, making it the most traversed Black History mobile exhibit in American history. Dr. Khalid El Hakim is the founder of the Black History 101 Museum, and he is a highly sought-after speaker. Topics of Black history, social studies, education, museum studies, hip and race relations. Dr. Khalid was named of the change makers for NBC Universal's The Hate Campaign and listed as one of 100 men of distinction for Black enterprise. He recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive on the campus of Western Michigan University. The Black History 101 Mobile Museum is currently scheduling in-person and virtual exhibits nationwide. For more information, contact Dr. Khalid Hakim directly, 313-645-4197, 313-645-4197, or their website at blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. That's blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. You can also email him at history101@yahoo.com, b3101@yahoo.com. Visit 4glossygirls.com. That's the number 4glossygirls.com, and follow them on Instagram at 4glossygirls.
Black Bees products are a collection of natural, organic, personal care products with an appreciation of nature and bees. Our philosophy is without bees, we have nothing. We are honoring our Nile Valley ancestors who understood the importance of bees. Black Bees created a quality, natural, organic personal care line that would be affordable to everyone. We hope you try and enjoy our Black Bees products line and come back and visit us at blackbeesproducts.com.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Monday, January 18th, 2021. It's Dr. King Day, so happy Dr. King Day to everybody. Hopefully you learned some things about Dr. King that you did not already know. Hopefully you read, you've been reading books about Dr. King, like Stride Toward Freedom, Dr. King's first book that came out in 1958, which is about the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was in 1958 at a book signing for Stride Toward Freedom that Dr. King was stabbed in the chest with a letter opener by a mentally ill woman named Azola Ware Curry. All right. And he almost died. There was two police officers that rendered him aid right there on the scene. One was African-American, one was white, and they saved his life. And then the surgeons that operated on him, there was an African-American surgeon and a white surgeon also. Okay, so hopefully you learned some things about Dr. King and his understanding, his philosophy. I'm so tired of hearing people misrepresent the I Have a Dream speech. First of all, the original name of the speech was Normalcy Never Again. Original name of the speech was not I Have a Dream. When you read the article, I think it's from the Washington Post by Clarence B. Jones, who was one of Dr. King's speechwriters, he talks about how in the drafts of the speech, the phrase I Have a Dream didn't even exist, because the speech wasn't about a dream. It's about holding America accountable for a promissory note they gave us 100 years prior in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation. And when we take the promissory note to the bank and cash it, it's marked insufficient funds. It's talking about holding America accountable for the promises they made to us in dismantling white supremacy, fighting against police brutality, fighting against Jim Crow segregation, housing discrimination, voter suppression, voter intimidation, not being able to vote, things like this. This is what the speech is about. The speech is not about a dream. Okay, people hijacked the speech, and then after it's called Normalcy Never Again, then it was renamed a cancel check. Later, it's going to be called I Have a Dream. That's not what the speech was about. Okay, so this is why we have to do research, and you have a lot of misinformation on the television. It's a vision that tells lies. Now, there's some good information. You know, I was watching Lawrence O'Donnell, The Last Word, and some people have more knowledge about Dr. King, you know, even on MSNBC than other people. And Lawrence O'Donnell referenced a speech from Dr. King in 1967 at Berkeley, California, University of California, Berkeley, I should say, May 17, 1967. Dr. King said, now this sums up what's going on right now, especially with the insurrection attack, the domestic terrorists that attacked the White House. America's chief moral dilemma. Dr. King is talking about America's chief moral dilemma. Dr. King said many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship over black Americans. Many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship for African Americans. So African Americans went out and voted. We voted for Joe Biden because his policies are much more beneficial to us than Donald Trump. We knew Donald Trump was an existential threat. We've seen what he's done the past 4 years. Then you had an effort because some Republicans didn't like the way we voted. Then they wanted to nullify our vote and overturn our vote. They wanted to have a dictatorship. Okay? It's one man, one woman, one vote. They want to have a dictatorship and overturn our vote because they ain't like the way we voted. In spite of the voter suppression that was taking place, especially in the South, in spite of the voter suppression that was taking place, we still came out and voted to vote Trump out of office. And then they want to nullify our vote. Trump wants to put pressure on Brett Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia, to try to overturn the vote because African Americans didn't vote the way he wanted them to vote, even though he tried to win our vote with this fool's gold plan that he called a platinum plan. I call it the fool's gold plan because that's what it was. So many Americans want a democracy for Americans, but a dictatorship for African Americans at the very same time. All right, so I want to go back to this, another excerpt of this interview from May 8th, 1967. Dr. King is being interviewed by Sander Vanocur, Vanocur, for NBC News. And this interview deals with another phase of the civil rights movement. And this interview is called After Civil Rights, Black Power. After Civil Rights, Black Power. And Black Power, and when I interviewed Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, Associate Professor of History at Ohio State University, and he's on the he was the chair of the advisory board that put together this study teaching hard history of American slavery. You know, one of the things we talked about was how Black Power and the Black Power movement was the next logical step in the civil rights movement. Okay, let's go to this clip, Shakita.
As to grapple with them. Was there something hypocritical about the South existed and the North could point the finger? And then when the Civil Rights Acts were passed in the early 60s, you couldn't point the finger anymore?
Well, there was no doubt about the hypocrisy of large segments of the nation on the whole question of racial equality. I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in 64 and even 65 with the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.
But isn't that part of the dilemma now? That people knew that Negroes were being denied what was guaranteed to them by the Constitution, by the fact that they were citizens of this country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, now it's up to them?
Well, I think the dilemma is much deeper, and I think one during this period of transition has to be very honest with America. And honesty impels me to admit that America has broad racist elements still alive. Racism is still existing in American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality. I think we have to see that vacillation has always existed, ambivalence has always existed, and this to me is the so-called white backlash. It's merely a new name for an old phenomenon. I see the white backlash as a continuation of the same ambivalence and vacillation of white America on the whole question of racial justice that has existed since the founding of our nation. I think the other thing that we must see at this time is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we're getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
Do you think white people in this country, and I'm talking about non-segregationists, people thinking they're devoid of racism, do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that I think they're in a very small minority. I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality. And they are always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro in every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it? Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
That's a part of it. And that grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. if you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize it. The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here and changed, treated in very inhuman fashion. And this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. And that can never be overlooked. So I think these things are absolutely necessary. The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Apart from wanting to live better, which all of us want to do, to raise one's children in a better way, to be better, does the Negro in America know what he wants to be?
I'm convinced that almost every Negro in this country, other than those who have been so scarred by the system that they've become pathological in the process, and we all have to battle with pathology, and nobody really knows what it means to be a Negro unless one can really experience it. And I know we all have to battle with this constant drain of a feeling of nobodiness. But in spite of this, I think the vast majority of Negroes in this country know that they want to be people, they want to be men, they want equality, period. It just boils down to that. And we haven't been able to be people. We haven't been men because of all of the conditions that we've lived with and the syndrome of deprivation surrounding conditions, whether it's in housing, or in the economic area, or in schools, or in the vicious credit practices that we face in the ghetto, and all of the problems of closed doors and constant defeats. But in spite of all this, I think we all know, basically, that we want to be men. We want to be persons judged not on the basis of the color of our skin, but on the basis of the content of our character.
Hey, pause it right there, Shakita.
Many young Negroes
Pause it right there.
don't want anything.
And then back it up about 20, 30 seconds. Okay, so here Dr. King is dealing with economics, structural racism, the lack of commitment from the larger white America to go beyond the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and actually deal with structural racism, economic issues, housing, credit practices, bank loans, all different types of things like this. And at a point in that interview, Dr. King says that there was never really a sincere, real commitment from the larger white community to go as far as we wanted them to go. All right. And also, he talked about the stigma that the dark skin of African Americans, okay, and how that skin is looked at as being tainted. And the legacy of slavery, during the legacy of slavery, you're dealing with the justification of slavery based upon the inferiority of African Americans, and they justify slavery biologically. They justify based upon science. When you read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, she talks about cognitive dissonance and how you will relabel other people to then justify how you mistreat those people. You'll put negative pejorative terms on people, call them savages, subhuman, all different types of things like this to then justify mistreating them. Because otherwise, if you look at them as being equal to you, you would have a problem doing that. It will bother your conscience. But to absolve yourself of any guilt, absolve yourself of any responsibility, you relabel the people to then justify mistreating them. Okay, and this is what Dr. King is talking about here in this interview as well. The calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Have you all heard this interview before? You did. You don't hear this. I mean, this aspect of Dr. King, you don't hear as much as holding hands and everybody getting along in the beloved community. So when he talks about the economic commitment, we're going to go back to this speech here in just for a few more minutes. He talks about the economic commitment. Then this ties into the Kerner Commission Report. So this interview is from May 8th, 1967. Then you have the Detroit Rebellion in June of, July, I should say, July 67. And then July 28th, 1967, President Lyndon Johnson convenes the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, also called the Kerner Commission Report, also called the Kerner Commission. And then it's going to be in March of 1968 that they actually come out with their report, their findings, and that's the month before Dr. King's assassinated. Let's go back to this clip here for a few more minutes. You can press play. We can go back to the clip, Shakita. Okay.
Persons judged not on the basis of the color of our skin, but on the basis of the content of our character.
Did you know that many young Negroes don't want anything that smacks of the American white middle class, but do they want something that smacks of whatever is the black middle class, or do they just not want bourgeois values, which after all the basis of this democracy?
Well, I think we have to see what they are saying. I would be the first to agree that integration does not mean giving up everything that has an Afro-American taint, so to speak, a background. I think there are certain unique things within any culture and certain cultural patterns that when you get to the process of amalgamation can really lift the whole culture. It seems to me that integration at its best is the opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. I think the other thing that we've got to see is that these young people are saying that there must be a revolution of values in our country. As Jimmy Baldwin said on one occasion, what advantage is there in being integrated into a burning house? And I feel that there is a need for a revolution of values in America, because some of the values that presently exist are certainly out of line with the values and the idealistic structure that brought our nation into being. Unfortunately, we haven't been true to these ideals. And many of the values of so-called white middle-class society are values that need to be reviewed and re-evaluated, and in a real sense, they need to be changed. So I think the young people in the Negro community who are raising these questions are raising some very profound questions about our total society. In other words, they are saying that there must be a restructuring of the architecture of our society where values are concerned. And with this, I would agree with. So in the quest for integration, I think we can offer our whole nation something, because there are three evils in our nation. It's not only racism, but economic exploitation of poverty would be one, and then militarism. And I think in a sense, and in a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together, and we aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood on the Lincoln Memorial that day in August '63, you said, "I had a dream." Did that dream envision you could see a war in Asia preventing the federal government doing for the Negroes, preventing the society doing for the Negroes, that which you think had to be done?
No, I didn't envision that then. I must confess that that period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others all across the nation, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And in 1954, which was, 64, 1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation.
Dr. King, even if there had not
been
a war in Asia, would you still...
Pause it right there. He goes on to talk about how the Vietnam War and the effort from the Vietnam War takes away from drawing attention to the civil rights movement and the plight of African Americans, the needs for African Americans. Okay. He talks about how the Vietnam War dominates the front page of the newspapers, dominates the headlines, dominates stories on the evening news, and the issues pertaining to African Americans get pushed to the side. So if we look at the Kerner Commission, blackpast.org has a good article dealing with the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. Okay, I've talked about this before. All this ties together. All right. This is why the book Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. is so good, because you get to deal with a chronology of history. But blackpast.org has this article, the 1967 National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorder, Kerner Commission. And it breaks down what precipitated the commission and the findings of it, okay? And the Kerner Commission was designed to find out three things, okay? It was pertaining to the rebellions that were taking place in the inner cities from 1964 to 1967. And it was designed to answer three questions. What happened? Why did it happen? And what can be done to prevent racial disturbances from happening in the future? Okay, what happened? Why did it happen? And what could be done to prevent racial disturbances from occurring in the future? It was an 11-member commission, and the chairman was Governor Otto Kerner of the state of Illinois. So it's ostensibly known as the Kerner Commission. And one of the things they concluded was that the United States was, quote, moving toward two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. So in their findings, they found what they did was they looked at 23 cities across the nation that experienced racial rebellions. And they found that the racial disturbances were not the result of a single triggering event, but that in all cities surveyed, African Americans experienced severe economic and social disadvantages compared to whites. Also, the report noted that Americans experienced. Also, the report noted that the riots or rebellions were not the result of any conspiracy. Rather, they were a response to what the report identified as the racial attitudes and behaviors of white Americans toward African Americans. Okay, the racial attitudes and behaviors of white Americans toward African Americans. So, responding to why the rebellions occurred, in response to why the rebellions occurred, the Kerner report pointed to African Americans' frustration and feelings of powerlessness. African Americans' frustration and feelings of powerlessness regarding extremely high rates of unemployment and underemployment, police brutality, poverty, and inadequate public services. Okay, extreme high rates of unemployment and underemployment, poverty, police brutality, and adequate public services. Now, the report continued that largely poor African American population was confined to central cities while a predominantly white population moved out, and that the racism of white Americans was, quote, essentially responsible for the explosive mixture, quote, leading to the uprisings. Now, this is 1967, okay? And they're talking the impact that racism has had, and you're dealing with government policies that created the suburbs, like the Federal Housing Act of 1949, that allowed white people to put 3% down to get low interest loans on houses being built out in the newly formed suburbs, and they're using the redlining process to make these loans. And redlining that's created about 1937. That comes from the Homeowners Loan Corporation. The Homeowners Loan Corporation was created right around 1933, 1944. These are all government entities, and the redlining process was adopted by banks and insurance companies. And what it did was, in the inner cities, many African American communities, they were shaded on a map in red, and these were said to be high risk properties to loan money to purchase. And the properties like out in the suburbs were in green, so these were low risk. All right. Then when we tried to get loans to buy properties out in the suburbs, we were discriminated against. When we try to get loans, like the federal loans, and also when we try to use, so this is 49 is 4 years after World War II ends. You have a lot of African American men who were World War II veterans. And we're trying to take advantage of the GI Bill. And the GI Bill gave money to go to college, loans to start businesses, and loans to buy homes. So you have white men taking advantage of this, going to college, getting degrees, getting loans for businesses, getting loans to buy homes in the newly formed suburbs. They're moving out of the inner city, moving out to the suburbs. We're largely being discriminated against from taking advantage of these benefits in the GI Bill that, one, African-American World War II veterans earned those benefits. Two, our taxpayer dollars pay for those benefits. And we're largely being excluded from taking advantage of them to various degrees or full advantage, and subsidizing white people being able to take advantage of them fully. Okay, so you have this precipitating these rebellions taking place. And then on top of this, you have the deindustrialization of the inner city as the suburbs are being built. The deindustrialization of the inner city, factories and corporations moving from the inner city out to the suburbs, the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 1956 that drive tens of thousands of miles of U.S. interstate highway all across the country. They run through African-American communities, wiping out a lot of our homes and businesses, disrupting our communities. Okay, so in response to responding why the rebellions occurred, the Kerner Report pointed to African-Americans' frustration and feelings of powerlessness regarding extremely high rates of unemployment and underemployment, poverty, police brutality, etc. Okay, now answering what can be done to prevent this in the future. Answering what can be done to prevent this in the future. The commission suggested that the federal government intervene to improve housing, improve education, improve employment opportunities, and social services for African Americans. This is what the Kerner Commission is saying. There has to be a massive investment into these areas to address these conditions that are structural and the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, etc. The commission suggested that the federal government intervene to improve housing, education, employment opportunities, and social services for African Americans. Also, the Kerner Commission recommended to dismantle discriminatory practices in education, employment, the police force, and criminal court systems. President Johnson accepted the report but did not support the conclusions, and minimal efforts were made to address the problems identified by the commission. Now, it is true that he was preoccupied by the Vietnam War, which took a lot of attention. This is something Dr. King talks about in the interview, okay? How the Vietnam War distracted away from the civil rights movement. But even after the Vietnam War, all this is being ignored, the recommendations of the Kerner Commission for the most part. This is something extremely important. We need to reintroduce the Kerner Commission report and get those solutions implemented, okay? We're out of time here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Those watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, keep watching. We're going to keep broadcasting for a few more minutes. Right now, it's correct. Wrong behavior is not over till we win. Stay tuned for Pastor Greg Davis. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right, stand by, everybody. Okay, we do 1 hour on 910 AM the Superstation WFDF. Only there for an hour. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. And then Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF in Detroit. I'm a radio talk show host here in Detroit. We're going to keep going for a few more minutes here. If you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and then also through PayPal, paypal.me /the AHN Show, paypal.me /the AHN Show. Okay. This helps us to keep broadcasting 6 days a week. For 4 years, we were just doing Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. But as of October 12th, we started doing Monday through Friday also. So we hit 6 days a week. So this helps us keep broadcasting 6 days a week, keep doing the research, stay on the air. Also, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We have a few more spots left. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network also. All right. Let's see here. Okay, let's go back to, we're going to go back to this clip of Dr. King here for a minute. Then I want to get to dealing with the Civil War history and the rewriting of Civil War history. And this ties into Reverend Raphael Warnock winning in Georgia. And so all this history is connected. And to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence, okay? So all of this history is connected.
For 25 years, Black History 101 Mobile Museum has carried on the rich legacy of the Black Museum movement in America by showcasing original artifacts of the experience at colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, and cultural events, making it the most traversed Black History mobile exhibit in American history. Khalid L. Kim is the founder of the Black History 101 Museum, and he is a high sought-after speaker on topics of Black history, social studies, education, museum studies, hip-hop, and race relations. Khalid was named among the change makers of BC Universal's Erase the Hate campaign and listed as one of the 100 men of distinction for Black enterprise. He recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive on the campus of Western Michigan University. The Black History 101 Mobile Museum is currently scheduling in-person and virtual exhibits nationwide. For more information, please contact Dr. Khalid Al Kim directly at 313-645-197, 313-645-497, or visit the site at blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. That's blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. Also email him at bhistory101@yahoo.com, bhistory101@yahoo.com. With blackbusinesstee.com, the messages are clear and meaningful. Keep your business in the black and out of the red. Mind your Black business, know your numbers, and plan strategically. Black Business Boss, lead your industry. Support Black business, encourage, patronize, and uplift one another. Blackbusinesstee.com currently has products sold in Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles, with proceeds returned to the Black community. They have a wide selection of hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, hats, sweatshirts that support Black-owned businesses. Visit the website blackbusinesstee.com. That's blackbusinesstee.com.
Black Bees products are a collection of natural, organic, personal care products with an appreciation of nature and bees. Our philosophy is without bees, we have nothing. We are honoring our Nile Valley ancestors who understood the importance of bees. Black Bees create a high-quality, natural, organic, personal line that would be affordable to everyone. We hope you try and enjoy our Black Bees products line and come back and visit us at blackbeesproducts.com.
Are you getting ready for fall or winter? We have the solution for all seasonal clothing needs. Kemeticwear.com is the go-to online source for Kemetic African fashion and lifestyle products with a contemporary twist. We're committed to offering you styles reflecting our African heritage. Kemeticwear.com is inspired by KemeticScribes.com to influence our people in learning and showing pride. Please visit our website at Kemeticwear.com.
All right, let me, let's see, where do we leave off here? Just stand by. Let me pull this clip up. How's everybody doing? Did you all go to any Dr. King Day celebrations today? Hopefully they were good. And then, I understand, see, part of the problem with some of these Dr. King Day celebrations, it just needs to be us there. I understand people want to have, other people there, things like that, but sometimes we need to have like in-house conversations. Sometimes you can't say what needs to be said because you feel that you have to tiptoe around and don't want to hurt people's feelings. Things like that. Sometimes we have to see our people don't understand Dr. King, so we need to, and we largely don't understand Malcolm X either. And so a lot of times we just need to have in-house conversations among us. All right, let's see where we're. Just a second. Let me see something here. Where do we leave off? Okay.
We aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood on the Lincoln Memorial that day in August, 1963, you said, "I had a dream." Did that dream envision that you could see a war in Asia, preventing the federal government doing for the Negroes, preventing the society doing for the Negroes that which you think had to be done?
No, I didn't envision that then. I must confess that that period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others all across the nation, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And in 1954, which was, 64, 1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation.
Dr. King, even if there had not been a war in Asia, would you still not have had this nightmare insofar as the Negro movement for equality then touched on two things that the white community holds sacred: their children and their property?
Oh, I have no doubt that we would have encountered great difficulties, great problems of resistance if the war had not been in existence. So that I'm not going to say that all of our problems would be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended. But I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during the time of war. I noticed the other day, some weeks ago, a Negro was shot down in Chicago, and it was a clear case of police brutality. That was on page 30 of the paper, but on page 1 at the top was 780 Viet Cong killed. That is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence. And it strengthened the military-industrial complex of our country. And it's made our job much more difficult, because I think we can go along with some programs, if we didn't have this war on our hands, that would cause people to adjust to new developments, just as they did in the South. They said they'd never ride the bus with us. Blood would flow in the streets. They wouldn't go to school and all of these things. But when people came to see that they had to do it because the law insisted, they finally adjusted. And I think white people all over this country will adjust once the nation makes it clear that in schools, in housing, we've got to learn to live together as brothers. I think the biggest problem now is that we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rate, so to speak. It didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. Now we are confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance. They may put it on many other things, but we can't get rid of slums and poverty without it costing the nation something.
Okay, so here Dr. King is talking about the economic investment, investing billions of dollars to change, to deal with, address structural racism, to address the very things that the Kerner Commission was talking about addressing. Now, this interview was May 8th, 1967. This is even before the Kerner Commission was convened, okay? But what Dr. King is talking about and the investment that needs to be made, this was what the Kerner Commission concluded, and they presented their report in March of 1968. So, you know, he is predicting what the results of the Kerner Commission report are going to be, and he was correct. But the commitment was not there on behalf of white America. The commitment was not there on behalf of white America to address those issues. Now they may march with you, and I know there's some. I know there was some genuine, some people, white people who meant well. There were genuine. Some attacked, some killed, things like this. I understand, but you have to, when it comes to the investment, okay, the economic investment to address these conditions. What's important to understand is that oftentimes those well-meaning white people are not the ones that got to vote on this stuff in Congress. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. A lot of your neighbor, you know, your friend, things like this. A lot of times the well-meaning white people that march with you and also get tear gas and beaten with you, they may not be the ones that got to vote on this in Congress, especially in the Senate. And the Senate is like 95% white. Back then, the Senate was basically 100%. I think he had Senator Ed Brooke, so it's like 99% white. But yeah, so see, that's the other dynamic to this. All right. Okay, so check out the Kerner Commission report and check out the Senator Edward Brooke of now he was a Republican, he's an African American Republican, and he represented Massachusetts from 1967 to 1979. Okay, yeah, so right around this time, you know, when the Kerner Commission report comes out, he is you know, he's a U.S. senator, and you know, let me see, I think okay, he was Massachusetts. Let me see here. Okay, he was originally in the U.S. House of Representatives, it looks like, Republican, elected to the U.S. Senate in 1966, ended the 85-year absence of African-American senators. Brooks was the first properly elected senator and the first Black politician from Massachusetts to serve in Congress. While he professed loyalty to the Republican Party, he was an independent thinker who acted according to his conscience. Throughout his political career, Edward Brooks demonstrated resiliency and defined, all right, thanks, Tina, and defined himself as a representative of his entire constituency rather than as an African-American senator seeking solely to advance Black interests. Let me see something here. President Lyndon Johnson appointed Senator Ed Brooks to be the president's Commission on Civil Disorders, appointed Senator Ed Brooks to the President's Commission on Civil Disorders shortly after he was elected to the Senate. Governor Otto Kerner of Illinois led the group, also known as the Kerner Commission, charged with outlining the causes of the urban riots in 1967. The Kerner Commission also proposed solutions for the epidemic of racial unrest. Let me see, let's blow this up. This is from history.house.gov, history.house.gov, okay? And this is at house.gov. House.gov is the official website of the U.S. House of Representatives. They also have a history section there because I've done research like in their history section. And then also if you visit senate.gov, senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate. And senate.gov, they also have a history section there as well, okay, at senate.gov. So this is about Senator Edward Brooks. And then if we go down here, this deals with Senator Brooks and the Kerner Commission. Okay. So the Kerner was charged outlining the causes of the urban riots I talked about. Now, the commission reported that American society was sharp divided along racial lines. The member commission included Senator Edward Brooks, suggested the government fund a series of programs to increase educational, housing, and employment opportunities for minorities in urban areas. Although Johnson was dedicated to better circumstances of minorities because he had on poverty, President Johnson signed the Fair Housing. This is after Dr. King's assassinated Housing Act. He signed September 1965. President Johnson is also going to sign Executive Order 11246, which is more popularly known as affirmative action. That was President Johnson also. All right. Okay, so 11-member commission, including Senator Edward Brooks, suggests the government fund, that means money, fund a series of programs to increase educational, housing, and employment opportunities for minorities living in urban areas. Although President Johnson was dedicated to bettering the circumstances, okay, although President Johnson was dedicated to bettering the circumstances of minorities, his preoccupation with the Vietnam War and decision not to seek re-election rendered the mission's recommendations ineffective. So then, 1968, Nixon, who ran that form of law and order, then wins that 1968 election. President Johnson doesn't run for a re-election, and then Nixon. With Nixon, you have a backlash, a white backlash against the perceived advancement and progress of African Americans, and you have a reversal from that. And then we're going to deal with, after Jimmy Carter, we're going to deal with 8 years of Reagan and then 4 years of Bush Sr. All right. So check this out here from house.gov. This deals with Edward William Brooke III. Edward William Brooke III. Okay. Senator Edward William Brooke. All right. So we get that. We get that clip. Okay. Yeah. So all of this ties together. Okay. And we have to understand politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay. Politics impacts every aspect of our lives, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. All right. And then politics impacts the economy that our African-American owned businesses operate within. Now, I'm not just a historian. My degree's in business administration. So I understand this better than most people. I've managed African-American owned businesses. I managed a business consulting company. I managed a African-American company where we had government contracts with the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, and the state of Michigan. So I understand the business side. Well, I've done consulting for nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, and politics impacts all of this. All right. And so back in 2016, when you had people on social media saying we don't need to vote, we just need to do economic empowerment, invest in the stock market, I said that's good, but we also need to vote for a president whose economic policies are going to create a economy that's beneficial for our African-American owned businesses. But we see what happens. We see what happened. Donald Trump mishandled the coronavirus pandemic, which then tanked the economy. And as of April of 2020, we see that 41% of African-American owned businesses went out of business. Forbes.com had an article that talked about this, citing the study from the New York Federal Reserve. Okay. And that was in April. Now it's probably at least 50% of African-American owned businesses have gone out of business. Well, this is what happens. This is understanding how politics impacts every aspect of our lives. Our businesses rely on an economy. If you got white businesses going out of business, what the hell you think our businesses are doing? Okay. So if we look at this article here from Forbes.com, the COVID-19 crisis has wiped out nearly half of Black small businesses. This is from Forbes.com, a business publication. The COVID-19 crisis has wiped out nearly half of Black small businesses. This article came out, this was August 10th, but they were citing information through, they were looking at April. Okay. Nearly half of, close this out. Nearly half of Black small businesses have been wiped out by the end of April. That's April 2020, as the pandemic ravaged minority communities disproportionately, according to a report from the New York Federal Reserve. Black-owned businesses were more than twice as likely to shutter as their white counterparts, the report found. National representative data on small businesses indicate that the number of active business owners fell 22% from February to April 2020, about 22%. From February to April 2020, the largest drop on record. Black businesses experienced the most acute decline with a 41% drop. Latinx or Latino business owners fell by 32%, and Asian business owners dropped by 26%. Oh, so you mean Asians? I thought, because people say, oh, we don't need to vote, we just need to do economic empowerment, do like the Asians. So you mean like close your business down? Is that what you mean? So keep in mind, this was as of April 2020. That wasn't even the worst of it. That we hadn't even reached the worst of the coronavirus pandemic then. What do you think is now? It's at least 50% of our businesses have gone out of business. This is understanding how elections have consequences. Economic empowerment is not independent of politics, laws, and policies. So read this article here from Forbes.com. It's from August 10th, 2020. The COVID-19 crisis has wiped out nearly half of Black small businesses. Who would have thought that elections have consequences? No one saw that coming. The COVID-19, now, if you've been listening to my show, you know through 2016, leading up to the election, I warned our people about Donald Trump. They said he has to be stopped because I saw what was coming. I studied him. I saw what was coming. I warned our people about him day after day, after day after day. I was doing actually syndicated radio 5 days a week. My show, the Michael Imhotep show. Then I was doing Roland Martin's actually syndicated radio show. I was doing William Ballantyne's nationally syndicated radio show. So I warned our people about this because I'm listening to Trump. My degree is I'm listening to Trump. I tell you, he don't know what the hell he's talking about and doesn't understand the economy either. So we saw what happened. Okay. Lastly, I want to go to this last story here. So on Sunday's show, we talked about Reverend Raphael Warnock, who won the Georgia Senate race, beat Senator Kelly Loeffler twice. We talked about the history of the runoff elections, statewide runoff elections in Georgia, and how they were designed to, how they come out of racism and segregation. They're designed to keep African Americans out of statewide political power. There's a article from 11alive.com dealing with that deals with this history. What's the name of that one? And it talks about Denmark Groover also. It's the history behind runoff races. Yeah. Runoffs arose to limit power of Black voters in Georgia. Runoffs arose to limit power of Black voters in Georgia, much as South experts say. Okay. And this is, and there's some other information out dealing with this as well. But this is an article from 11alive.com, channel 11 in Georgia, that deals with this history. And this is why understanding history is so important as well, and also understanding the history of slavery and the Civil War. So this is this article is from November 9th, 2020. Runoffs arose to limit power of Black voters in Georgia. Close that. Runoff arose to limit power of Black voters in Georgia, much of South experts say. And one of the things they talk about here is at the Georgia State Capitol in the 1960s, State Representative Denmark Groover led a charge for runoff elections. A full report looking at civil rights in America called Denmark Groover, State Representative Mark Groover, a staunch segregationist, pushed for run elections in Georgia as a way to challenge a growing Black political power, The report reads, quote, the support for the majority vote plan reinforced moderate segregationist position. It did not remove anyone's right to cast a ballot, but commonly regarded as hampering Americans, the stigmatized voters, end quote. So while still allowing Black voters to cast a ballot, runoff elections at the time attempted to make sure candidates representing the white majority, not the interests of Black citizens, would be elected. All right. So let me just play this. I want to play the clip here. It's about 2 minutes. Then when I want to get to the real clip dealing with the rewriting of the Civil War history. All right. Let's go to this clip here.
Do you have an idea or business that requires app development or thinking of moving your IT resources to the cloud? We have post-paid and profit-sharing plans for unique ideas or profitable businesses. Who can take advantage of this unique program? Entrepreneurs with unique ideas, startups, small to medium businesses. Contact us 267-209-0352.
Visit nomadicsystems.net, nomadicsystems.net today. Visit 4glossygirls.com. That's the number 4glossygirls.com, and follow them on Instagram at 4glossygirls.
Let me see. Is it queued up? All right. Let me cue this up. We got an ad playing. Stand by. All right. So let's see.
This election, Georgia has shifted to the center of the political universe with 2 Senate races.
The process of runoff elections may seem fairly simple, but these contests once served a racially motivated purpose. 11 Alive's Joe Hankey with more for us tonight.
While many Georgia voters may be familiar with runoff elections, they may not be familiar with the history of runoffs in Georgia and across the South. At the Georgia state capitol in the 1960s, a state representative named Denmark Groover led a charge for runoff elections. A federal report looking at civil rights in America calls Groover a staunch segregationist who pushed for runoffs in Georgia as a way to challenge growing black political power. And, quote, support for the majority vote plan reinforced the moderate segregationist position. It did not remove anyone's right to cast a ballot, but it was commonly regarded as hampering African Americans, the stigmatized bloc voters. While still allowing black voters to cast a ballot, runoffs at the time made sure candidates representing the white majority, not the interest of black citizens, would be elected.
They don't function precisely that way anymore, but one has to wonder what function they do have.
Cal Jilson is a political science professor at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. He says runoffs are linked to elections in the South, requiring a candidate to have more than 50% or a majority of votes cast to win an election.
Runoff is an opportunity for the white majority to come together and beat back a challenge from a black candidate.
Frequently, as you know.
And when lawmakers such as Groover wrote and passed laws requiring runoffs, they did not hide their intentions.
Before anyone was politically correct, people spoke very directly about their sense of race and the importance of maintaining white supremacy. And that's what these electoral rules were intended to do.
Currently, Georgia is only one of 10 states, primarily in the South, using runoffs in primaries. Only Georgia and Louisiana use them for general elections. Jilson views runoffs as outdated election law.
There's less and less reason, and really fewer and fewer states as time goes by that use runoffs.
Okay, so that gives you that background history. That's a legacy of slavery coming out of white supremacy and racism. Keep in mind, Georgia is a former Confederate state. Georgia is a former Confederate state, a state that took up arms against the Union to fight in the Civil War, to join the Confederacy, fight in the Civil War, and to maintain slavery. Okay, this is what this is dealing with history of Georgia, understanding this history, and dealing with the Confederacy. Okay, so then you had a concerted effort to rewrite the history of the Confederacy, and to create this whole lie called the lost cause, and to make the issue all about states' rights and freedom and things like this. Well, whose freedom are you talking about? Okay, there's a good video from Vox.com, and this deals with This deals with how Southern socialites rewrote Civil War history. How Southern socialites rewrote Civil War history. It deals with the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The United Daughters of the Confederacy. And they altered, the United Daughters of the Confederacy altered the South's memory of the Civil War. Okay. They were, the United Daughters of the Confederacy were a significant leader of what's called the Lost Cause. And this was an intellectual movement that revised history to look more favorably on the South after the Civil War ends. Civil War is 1861, 1865. The United Daughters of the Confederacy were women from elite antebellum families that used their social and political clout to fundraise and pressure local governments, to erect monuments that memorialize Confederate heroes. Some of those monuments still exist today, and people are fighting over them. So, oh, it's part of history. Yeah, it's part of the history of the traitors to the Union that committed treason based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution and took up arms against the Union. It's the history of the traitors. They also formed textbook review committees. Okay, to reverse this process, we have to understand how this whole thing was constructed. Okay, they also formed textbook review committees that monitored what Southern school children learned about the war, about the Civil War. Their influential work with children created a lasting memory of the Confederate cause, and those generations grew up to be the segregationists of the Jim Crow era in the South. It was social engineering. They were being fed lies, just like a lot of these domestic terrorists that went to the U.S. Capitol building January 6th, and they said Donald Trump sent us here. Donald Trump invited us. Many of them idiots. Many of them are idiots and being lied to also. Talking about stop the steal. No, you should say stop the loss. His ass lost. That's what happened. He lost. It wasn't stolen. He lost. We beat him. He lost. He got outvoted. All right. So let's go to, I want to go to this clip here.
Listen to how this textbook describes slavery. The master often had a barbecue or a picnic for his slaves. Then they had a great frolic. Even while working in the cotton fields, they sang songs. The beat of the music and the richness of their voices made work seem light.
Yikes. That's from History of Georgia, a textbook published in 1954 that was taught across junior high schools in Georgia for decades. That sort of language is part of an intellectual movement called the Lost Cause, a distorted version of American Civil War history that's been prevalent in the South for a long time. It took shape soon after the defeat of the Confederate States in the war, when Southern historians like Edward Pollard and former Confederate General Jubal Early started preserving the South's perspective through their writings. They framed the Confederate cause as a heroic defense of the Southern way of life against the overwhelming forces in the North. That narrative has a few basic tenets: the glorification of Confederate soldiers who died for a cause they believed in, the belief that slavery was a benevolent institution, and maybe most importantly, that slavery was not the root cause of the war. The Lost Cause is one of the most notoriously effective efforts to rewrite history, and it was done by the losing side. So how did it become so deeply rooted in Southern memory? Blame the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The UDC was founded in Nashville in 1894 to preserve Confederate culture for generations to come. The women who made up the group descended from elite antebellum families, and they used their social and political clout to spread the pro-Southern version of the war as real history. You've probably seen their efforts to honor the Confederacy, but maybe you didn't know it was the UDC. They're the ones who covered the Southern landscape with memorials for Confederate leaders and soldiers. They used their fundraising and lobbying skills to pressure local governments into erecting monuments in prominent public spaces like courthouses and state capitals.
And installed here next to the state capitol by the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
The United Daughters of the Confederacy donated this memorial to the city back in the 30s.
They put them along roadsides and in parks. Any place that was remotely relevant to the Confederacy was memorialized. By the early 20th century, the UDC had 100,000 members, and chapters spread all over the country, but mostly in former Confederate states. And there's a reason they grew so quickly during that time.
So we're talking about roughly 3 decades after the end of the war, and the Confederate veterans themselves are beginning to die off. So there is this push to find ways to commemorate it, because the big challenge by 1900 was there's a new generation of white Southerners being born, and they never experienced the war years.
That push is visible. Most of the Confederate monuments were erected during the UDC's height of influence.
There's a rhetoric around monuments that we want to get this thing built before all of that generation has died off, and the reason we want it is to teach future generations about those men.
Okay, let me just back this up. So a big most of those monuments are going to be built between 1894 and 1914. Most of these Confederate statues and things like this, the UDC, United Daughters of the Confederacy, is founded right about 1894. And then you're going to have, from that period of time, and then the biggest, the largest amount of Confederate monuments are going to be built, looks like right around 1912, right around 1912 or something like that. Just a second here. It's right around 1912 or so where you have the most amount, but that period of time is going to be the period of time from 1894 to 1914, okay? 1894 to 1914. That's when you're going to have, during that period of time, and then you have, 1896, you have Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case. 1914 is beginning of World War I. And then, so during that period of time, 1894 to 1914, that's when you have the most number of Confederate monuments erected. All right. Let's go back to this clip here.
There's a rhetoric around monuments that we want to get this thing built before all of that generation has died off, and the reason we want it is to teach future generations about those men.
Dr. Karen Cox wrote the book on the UDC, and I asked her if it was fair to say the group established the lost cause as historical fact in the South.
Oh my God, yeah. They were the leaders of the lost cause into the 20th century, and they made it a movement about vindication.
Just to give you an idea of how effective they were, they successfully lobbied for a Confederate memorial in Arlington National Cemetery, which U.S. President Woodrow Wilson proudly unveiled to a cheering crowd. Now that's influence, right?
Monuments are the least of what they did.
What?
I mean, they are the most visible and tangible, but the work with children was far more influential.
It turns out a central UDC objective is shaping how children think about the war and their Southern heritage. One of their most powerful tools, textbooks. Take a look at this pamphlet called A Measuring Rod for Textbooks. It was written by the illustrious Southern historian Miss Mildred Rutherford, an educator, orator, and author of Southern history textbooks. She's also very pro-slavery. The pamphlet announced the formation of a textbook review committee featuring prominent Southerners like 5 former Confederate generals. This group was committed to spreading the truths of Confederate history, so they instructed school boards to reject any textbooks that did not accord full justice to the South. And they urged libraries to deface every book in their collection that didn't measure up by writing the words "unjust to the South" clearly on its cover. This pamphlet was shared widely with school boards throughout the South, and UDC-backed committees closely monitored history books to make sure Northern influence never never reached classrooms. So the core language of an approved textbook aligned precisely with that of the lost cause. You know, stuff like,
the Confederacy lost in the war between the states, but Georgia never forgot to honor her Confederate soldiers.
History of Georgia was on the UDC's approved list. It was also written by E. Merton Coulter, a self-described Southern historian and historian-described white supremacist.
They understand that how you educate, who wins the writing game, who wins the battle over history, ultimately wins the war. That's the big fight for the UDC.
But their work with children went further than the classrooms. The UDC formed an auxiliary group called the Children of the Confederacy, which was designed to get kids born in former Confederate states to actively participate in their version of history.
So, see, once again, I have to go back to teaching hard history American slavery. Teaching hard history American slavery. The reason why this study is so important and other studies like it, the reason why America needs a massive history lesson is because of the deliberate lies that have been socially engineered to rewrite the history of the Civil War. And the Civil War is tied to slavery, it's tied to Reconstruction, all of this. And then we can follow a chronology of that history, that ripple effect, that legacy of slavery, all the way up to today. So because when you go and study this whole lost cause initiative and how they rewrote the history and then the programming of the children, I mean, this stuff is deep. And then you see why you have, some white people who are out fighting to preserve Confederate monuments and flying the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia. And they think it's the Confederate flag because they don't understand history. There were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. The flag that's on the General Lee car on the Dukes of Hazzard, okay, the General Lee, and the General Lee is named after General Robert E. Lee, who was a white supremacist slave owner, and he's a general from Virginia, and he fights in the Civil War on behalf of the Confederacy. Well, the General Lee car that Bo and Luke Duke drove on the Dukes of Hazzard is named after General Robert E. Lee. And then the flag that's on top of the car, people think that's the Confederate flag. No, that's the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee's army, because there were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. And none of those flags were the Confederate battle flag. That flag never flew over the Confederate States of America. So once again, this is a misunderstanding of history. Okay, let's go back to for the rest of this clip here. But when you go through and study the program and the social engineering, the textbooks that were put out, the songs that the children sung, the programming of the children, things like this, right? And then keep in mind, these are people that are going to vote on policies that are beneficial or detrimental to African Americans. Some of these people are going to become attorneys, judges, politicians, sit in the U.S. House of Representatives, sit in the U.S. Senate, sit on the Georgia State Legislature. Some of them are going to become police officers. Some of them are going to become doctors. So this has wide-ranging ramifications.
The UDC formed an auxiliary group called the Children of the Confederacy, which was designed to get kids born in former Confederate states to actively participate in their version of history. Group leaders had kids recite call and response truths from something called the Confederate Catechism. Children up to the age of 18 would compete and be rewarded for memorizing long passages of lost cause rhetoric.
So it would be like an after-school thing, like that was your club. You would go after school to the meeting of the Children of the Confederacy, and your leader might teach you songs of the South, like Dixie or other songs that were considered Southern patriotic songs. They would have them write essays, go visit the veterans, and learn this catechism.
Children were also the centerpiece of their community's monument unveilings, like this living flag at the dedication of the Stonewall Jackson Monument in Richmond. Yes, those are school children. The UDC's efforts shaped the identities of children who grew up with the lost cause. They made history personal, and that made their story last longer.
Generations of children learning that narrative in a variety of ways grow up to be, segregationists in the 50s and 60s, because that's been drilled into them since they were children.
After World War I, the UDC started losing steam, but the damage was done. The monuments were in place, and the textbooks they wrote remained in Southern classrooms until the late 70s. And the women's group did it all without the right to vote or participate in politics.
You can still get glimmers of this lost cause memory of the war from people who will always choose to see it through the personal. And I think the UDC, to a great extent, was their goal.
So the next time someone says the Confederate monuments are about remembering our history, just know that that's exactly what the United Daughters of the Confederacy wants you to think.
All right. So check out that clip. I mean, there's a lot of history there. This is deep. This is why really understanding the Civil War, but then after the Civil War, because the UDC is founded right about 1894. So this is after Reconstruction ends also, which ends in 1877. But really understanding that period of history from 1865 up until like 1900, that's a really, really crucial period of time. David said we watched Gone with the Wind almost yearly in elementary school. Oh my God. That's traumatic. I don't know nothing about birthing no babies. Okay. and the Gone with the Wind kind of, okay, so that came out about 1939. Hattie McDaniels won an Oscar Best Supporting Actress, first African-American woman to win an Oscar, is right about 1939. So that, and that movie kind of like glamorized the Civil War in the South and the Southern way of life. Gone with the Wind and Clark Gable. So, all right. Okay, hey, if you like this type of information, also you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN Show, paypal.me / the AHN Show, and then also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And then also visit workingwithjohnray.com, workingwithjohnray.com for financial strategies and income shifting, workingwithjohnray.com. Okay, I thought you were going to post your information there, but I gotta pull it up. I'm working on a lot of things tomorrow. But visit workingwithjohnray.com. At the beginning of the show, I talked about the clip from, I talked about the speech from Dr. King from May 17th, 1967. It is America's chief moral dilemma. On The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, MSNBC, he talked about it on Dr. King Day. He talked about that speech, and I posted this here on Facebook. Let me pull this up and show it to you. And this ties right into what is taking place right now. It's amazing how all of this history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. May not be 100% exact, but it sure does rhyme. Let's look at this here. American moral dilemma. So Dr. King said, many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy, for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship over black Americans. Many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship for black Americans. So when we see that African Americans came out and voted our interests, voted a lot of people out of office whose policies were harmful and detrimental to us, like Donald Trump, like Senator Kelly Loeffler in Georgia, Senator David Perdue in Georgia. All right. Then effort to delegitimize our votes because you're the way we voted. So you want to have one man, one woman, one vote for white people. But then when we do the same thing, now you want leadership over and you want to overrule votes and delegitimize our votes and don't want to certify our votes when it's to state boards at canvass or canvassers like here in Wayne County where Detroit is. Okay. You have people on the county board, the canvassers, Republicans didn't want to certify our vote. Okay, because Detroit is voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. Now, if Detroit is voted overwhelmingly for the traitor in chief, McDonald, and you had the same number of irregularities with ballots, 400 ballots that were out of balance. Okay, but out of 255,000 votes. It was like 250,000 votes that came out of Detroit. There was a problem with 400 of them. Oh, all of a sudden, if it was 255,000 out of Detroit, there's a problem with 400 of them, but most of those votes were Donald Trump, wouldn't be a problem. That would have gone on and certified the vote. So many Americans would like to have a nation which is democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship over black Americans. All right. So check that out. And then I got to see if we can get some excerpts of that speech from May 17th, 1967. Okay. So visit workingwithjohnray.com. He has a concept called income shifting. He has a lot of information to offer there. It's a lot. Okay. I have to do an interview with him soon. But it deals with, one of the strategies deals with taking your money back, being able to keep more of your money. They have help with taxes, bill collectors, repairing your credit, helping you with people who have poor credit. They show you how to stop giving your money away. Visit workingwithjohnray.com, workingwithjohnray.com. All right, look, that's enough radio for today because I got to be back tomorrow night. Okay. So thanks for tuning in. Remember, at the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace.
Intuitive Design Clothing is an online accessory store that sells one-of-a-kind signature statement pieces for men and women. They also specialize in fashion consultations, closet organization, and decorating small spaces. Are you looking for a statement piece for a special affair, or would you like to add some select pieces to your ensemble of a series? If you're looking for something different, definitely contact Kathy Norman, owner and CEO of Intuitive Design Clothing. Visit their website, intuitivedesignClothing.com. That's intuitivedesignClothing.com, and you can email her at info@intuitivedesignClothing.com. Intuitive Design Clothing is where every entrance is a grand entrance. Soul Natural Beauty Products offer organic, plant-based skin and hair care products that will rejuvenate skin, naturally grow and thicken hair. Their whipped shea butter can heal or restore damaged skin cells to prevent hyperpigmentation and skin breakouts. All products are made with organic plant-based ingredients. Their maximum hair growth oil is fortified with organic herbal extracts and undeniably proves that Mother Nature knows best. It thickens, lengthens, softens, and conditions all types of hair. They even guarantee hair improvement within 90 days or a full refund. Their all-natural 24-hour deodorant leaves the body smelling fresh without sweating for up to 24 hours. It does not stain fabric, goes on smoothly, and has a refreshing lavender and frankincense aroma. It can be used by men, women, and even children. Place your order today at soulnaturalbeautyproducts.com. soulnaturalbeautyproducts.com. Follow them on Facebook at Soul Natural Beauty Products. With blackbusinesstee.com, the messages are clear and meaningful. Keep your business in the black and out of the red. Mind your black business. Know your numbers and plan strategically. Black Business Boss, lead your industry. Support black business. Encourage, patronize, and uplift one another. blackbusinesstee.com currently has products sold in Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles, with proceeds returned to the black community. They have a wide selection of hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, hats, sweatshirts that support black-owned businesses. Visit the website blackbusinesstee.com. That's blackbusinesstee.com.
Do you have an idea or business that requires app development or thinking of moving your IT resources to the cloud? We have post-paid and profit-sharing plans for unique ideas or profitable businesses. Who can take advantage of this unique program? Entrepreneurs with unique ideas, startups, small to medium businesses. Contact us 267-209-0352.
Visit nomadicsystems.net, nomadicsystems.net today. 25 years, the Black History 1 Mobile Museum has carried on the rich legacy of the Black Museum movement in America by showcasing original artifacts of the Black experience at colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, and cultural events, making it the most traversed Black History mobile exhibit in American history. Dr. Khalid Hakim is the founder of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum, and he is a highly sought-after speaker on topics of history, social studies, education, museum studies, health, and race relations. Dr. Khalid was named among the changemakers for NBC Universal's Erase the Hate campaign and listed as one of the 100 men of distinction for Black enterprise. He recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive on the campus of Western Michigan University. The Black History 101 Mobile Museum is currently scheduling in-person and virtual exhibits nationwide. For more information, please contact Dr. Khalil Hakim directly at 313-645-4197, 13645-4197, or their website at blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. That's blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. You can also email him at history101yahoo.com.